but at the same time,
it's more like embellished by
yeah.
the presence of these beat writers. Like they're the inspiration, but
Mm-hmm.
they're not really not so much the soul
Yeah.
of this poem.
It's
one thing that I really love about this is you have the 64 impalas, and I think that's such a great symbol because you can see that being used as like it totally takes on different meanings when you look at it through the context of like the beat generation, and when you look at it in contemporary hip hop culture. Like it's an aspirational vehicle both ways, but it sort of represents different things. Was that like a deliberate choice for a cover?
not really. It really comes from what I tried to do there was take, like you said, very iconic images in hip hop, um, and sort of kind of I don't turn them into muses. I feel like one of the beauties about literature and about language is that you can take anything and make it sound really majestic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, instead of just saying, okay, they did graffiti, it's the lyrical vandals who graffitied the streets. It's a way of taking something that is somewhat mundane and may look to other people as, ugh, and turn it into something beautiful. And that was the meaning of the poem. The poem was actually inspired by a professor that me and you have had, by Professor Redding, who always teaches us about the beat writer generation. And it made me think of the literary criticisms we hear about beat writers. That what they're doing weren't really art. It was obscene. It didn't have any form.
Like Hal got censored so many times.
And it mirrors exactly what we hear in this generation about rappers. I found the criticisms of both art very similar. But I'm now sitting in a classroom where I have to learn about the beat writers, and people like Ginsberg, people like Kerouac have now entered into the literary canon. And so it then makes me go, well, if it can happen for them, it can happen for us.
Absolutely.
And so what this was basically a compare and contrast essay of what the beat writer generation does.
I see it.
And what rappers do, and where they meet. They're the Kerouacs of the concrete. They're the Ginsbergs to the curb.
Yeah.
They're the William S. to their boroughs.
Wait, so with the William S. to the boroughs, did you mean like they're like poets but they're hiding out, or was there like
good
a
question.
more like...
Well, of course, hip hop was created in New York City.
Right.
And New York City has what?
Boroughs. Oh.
Very cool. It was saying you're the William S. to your borough is basically saying you're the poet, you're the speaker,
that is fantastic.
You're the beat writer of your particular borough. And so particularly the South Bronx and the early to mid 70s is when hip hop is believed to come into fruition through the musicantation of the great DJ Kool Herc. And then of course the sculpting of hip hop culture comes in with Africa Bambaataa, which is what I talk about when I say a DJ and Cool Rasta. That's DJ Kool Herc. Yeah. Bambaataa and a couple mobsters who, in the written form that will appear in my book that we'll talk about later, is Gangstars.
Okay.
Which of course is talking about the inception of gangster rap that is blew up from the West Coast. So I try to give a history of hip hop, where it is. I then go into a marriage of where hip hop and the beat writer generation meet. And then I go into sort of a demand of it being in the literary canon. You cannot blackball us from the poet elite.
Exactly.
We're owed a canonized seat. And that's what beat writers is. So I love it.
So what do you think like the biggest, I forget which line triggered this. Oh yeah, exactly that line, blackball us from the poet elite. What do you think the biggest barriers to modern poets, especially African-American poets and rappers, are these days? What do you think like the largest...
I think the issue is that many of the individuals who had the somewhat authority of canonizing people, of canonizing artists and canonizing literature, often do not understand the experiences or the conditions that bring certain art into existence. So if you're an individual who has grown up in, suburbia your entire life, and then you then come across a Chief Keef,
Mhm.
you abhor that music. You think it is formless. You think it is worth nothing. But what in actuality you don't understand is he is speaking and speaking for a very particular people. And I think that's the issue. I think that we as African Americans and as Black American authors run into this issue of we now are bringing this art that is rich in our experiences
Mhm.
and individuals who have the authority to canonize us and have the authority because of race and because of, you know, institutional racism and literature racism and whatever, who have the ability to elevate us and bring us into a popular culture, which we all know what that really means. we don't get that opportunity because they don't understand it, and I think that's the issue that we face, and that's why when I create things like Beat Riders, I try to take Kerouac
take that like institutional image and
Yeah.
sort of reappropriate it for
and it makes two type of people are going to read that poem.
exactly.
People that who know who the Beat Writers are, that's why it's named that.
Mhm.
And people who know the hip hop part.
Right.
And if at some point you go, who the heck is Africa Bambaataa? And you search it up, you've been
You
educated.
realize how great he is.
Or if you have to at some point go, who the heck is Kerouac?
Yeah.
You know, you realize who great it is. So it's an attempt of having the marriage and understanding the two cultures. And that's what I hope that piece does. And that's, I mean, so many different layers to it that I can talk about all day. But that's why
I mean, I love
I
it.
love that
You've
piece.
got you have something that really appeals. You even have I've noticed a difference between the mainstream and more like underground hip hop audience, because you're talking about Big Mama and Notorious B.I.G. in one line, and then the very next line you mentioned Chief Keef and Waka Flocka Flame. Like, do you think these more like, which one do you see more hope for institutionalizing rap music? Do you see it in the underground, or do you see it in these mainstream pieces?
I think that's an absolutely great question. I think there's more hope in institutionalizing more of the popular rap than it is the underground. Even though if we were to do the underground, we'd probably get more from it.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think it would be the more popular. But I think there are particular artists that will do that. And I think one of the main artists that have started that trend is Tupac Shakur.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have studied Tupac Shakur in classrooms, particularly his poetry. And I tell people all the time, you know, when we have the Biggie or Tupac debate, you know what I mean? And I personally give Biggie Smalls the go as far as being a rapper. But what we have to understand is, and what I think is the proper way that we need to study rap music, is study the figure, what the figure represents. And that's why Tupac Shakur will probably be the first one who breaks that mold and has begun to break that mold. It's because when you talk about Tupac Shakur on an institutional level, you don't really talk about his lyrics much.
That's
what
true.
you do, you talk about more of his iconic image. You know, what Tupac Shakur he was the offspring of the Black Panthers.
Right.
And that's what a lot of, if you really study the appearance of gangs, whatever, if you really study the gangs, you realize that these were sects that at one point were very revolutionary groups. And so he mimics that. And he shows that he was actually a child of a Black Panther. So he has that same type of militant attitude and approach to life and belief. And then he also has that very urban street-esque, very new hip-hop style. And you see that and you're like, this is a figure. This is a figure that has its own understandings, that has its own view, that we then can study. And we can, from that, learn more about Black culture and more about what it is to be Black in an urban community, and doing it from a way that is probably controversial, but I feel like it tells us more, similar to the same way the Beat Writers were. They were controversial in their approach, but at the same time, it told us a lot about America in that time and the nonconformist movement.
Absolutely. I mean, I see this at the very beginning. You directly evoke Ginsberg with the "I saw the